Hi everyone, this is FIDE Master Dennis Monokroussos, and today we're going to start what I hope will be another series. It won't be as long as our super fast Najdorf series, but it should go for a few episodes, maybe not all in a row, but I think it can prove useful. And it's basically a concept series that I've called, or I'm calling something like Don't Be a Zombie. Alright, and there'll be a variety of ways in which someone can be a zombie, and of course I wish to advocate that you not be one. Now the first thing I have to do is explain, of course, what I mean by a zombie. So I don't mean that you should not be undead. Now, I don't know, first of all, what it would even mean to be undead, and second, I think it's probably impossible for anything to actually exist in that state. Now, if it is possible and I'm wrong, I would still advocate that no one should be a zombie. So that would still be something that would be a bit of good advice to the extent that you can do anything about it. But what I mean by a zombie is something a bit different. So it's a term of art in philosophy of mind. And the idea there, when the question is asked if something could be or someone could be a zombie, well, something would be a better word than someone. And the point is that a zombie, as philosophers mean the term in philosophy of mind, would be a being that looked like a human and behaved like a human. You wouldn't be able to tell that it wasn't a human being, but in fact this entity, this creature, would have no internal mental life. So, we have all kinds of thoughts about this and that, and there's something that it's like for us to be in pain, or to smell a rose, or to be in love, whatever. Okay, for a zombie, there's no insight. There's no there, so to speak. There's just this outward behavior. So what I mean when I'm applying this to a chess context is that you should avoid just making moves out of a sort of automatism, just making them as if there was thought behind it, but that there really isn't. And I'll give a very, very simple example here. So let's suppose that all you've ever seen is the Ruy Lopez, and so you were taught, okay, e4, e5, you're black here. So we'll flip the board for you. Knight f3, knight c6, bishop to b5, a6. So you've seen this, you've played it many hundreds of times. Okay, one day on move 3, someone plays bishop to c4 against you. Well, if you're a zombie, you play the move a6, because you just know that's what you've been programmed to do on move 3, and you play it here as well, even though the opponent didn't play the Ruy Lopez. Now, this is, of course, an extreme example, but it's just to illustrate the idea of zombie chess. All right, so you play a6, even though you have absolutely no idea what it's for, why you're doing it. You just know that that's what you're supposed to do on move 3 against double king pawn opening. Okay, now, of course, a6 makes absolutely no sense here. It has nothing to do with the position. It doesn't affect anything that white is doing. And so it's an obviously kind of foolish move. But in more subtle cases, we all have, I think, a tendency towards zombiehood. So that's something that we need to be aware of. And what I'd like to do today is to show some other examples and to draw some general points from this. Okay, so let's go back to the start here. And, okay, we'll take a look at some more king pawn examples. All right, so e4, e5, f4. So again, let's say all you've seen is knight f3, and you were taught to play g5. It's not the only good move here, but it's the main line, and it's perfectly good. Now, let's suppose one day someone plays bishop to c4 against you. Well, again, zombiehood dictates that you play the move g5. But there's a crucial difference here, and it makes all the difference, really. After knight to f3, g5 makes very good sense. See, the point isn't that you want to fianchetto this bishop. Okay, you might. It's not such a bad thing. There are variations where it occurs, but that really isn't the idea. One of the ideas is to protect this pawn on f4, but even that's not really the main idea. The main idea, in fact, is to play g4, kicking the knight, and then often queen h4 check is a follow-up, which will grab some space there. It prevents white from activating his kingside pieces in a perfectly fluid way, and also prevents him from castling. Now, it's not the end of the world. I mean, there are a lot of lines where white doesn't castle in the king's gambit, but all things being equal, that's a little plus. And not just because his king gets out, but because it prevents his rook from easily getting to f1. So, with all that in mind, Now when we go to bishop to c4, you can see that g5 really just doesn't make any sense. There's no knight to kick on f3. g4 here, if it were black's move, would just drop the pawn. And in fact, it just becomes a target. White can play h4, and black has no really fantastic response to this. He can't play h6. It's legal, but it's very bad because h takes g5, and the pawn can't recapture because the rook would hang on h8. Okay, so that's to be avoided. f6 would be even worse because then queen h5 check comes, and then queen f7 check, and I think it's just a forced mate. Yeah, queen d5 check next, and then queen e5 is mate. Oh, I'm sorry, there's an f pawn there. So queen d5, king e7, and then h takes g5, and then f takes g5, queen e5 mate. So let me just display that instead of confusing everybody. King here. Let's say this check. And now here, okay, maybe this isn't best. Maybe black can survive for a while with queen to e8. But, okay, everything's pretty bad. But anyway, the basic idea that I was trying to get at was this mate. So, the point is, whether there's a quick forced mate or not, it's another story, but bishop to c4 is very, very poorly met by g5. It doesn't make any sense here. Okay, so there's a reason why g5 is played, and it's not that black can just set his pieces up any way he wants to. In the hedgehog, you can kind of do that, but in most openings, there's some interaction between the two pieces, the two sides pieces, and you just can't kind of unilaterally make these moves that pay no attention to what the other guy is doing. Okay, so that's a second example. Now let's turn to some Sicilian examples, and here it's a little bit more subtle, but again I think it's worth having this whole framework in mind. Okay, so e4, c5, knight f3, d6, and we'll start with just a traditional main line. So let's say black is a dragon player. So d4 takes, and we get to the dragon. All right, so this is the normal thing. This is what we're trained to do, let's say. So we know, okay, I want to play my dragon come heck or high water. Well, suppose one day your opponent plays knight to c3. Well, what do you do about this? See, this is a little bit interesting. So you might think, okay, I don't want to play knight f6, so because of e5 maybe. So let's say we're kind of aware, all right, there's something a little bit funny going on with this move order. So maybe we play g6. In fact, I had an email game some years ago with a pretty strong friend, a guy who had been an expert and I think still a high 8 player. And so he played g6. So he knew about knight f6, e5. Not that that line's fantastic for white, but he simply wanted to avoid it. So he thought, okay, with g6, he'll get into his regular dragon. So what happened was I played d4, takes, and then I played queen takes. And he's not getting his dragon. So he played knight f6, I played e5. We got to this position. Some materials even. He sacked the c-pawn, which I ignored with castling. And black is okay if he plays very, very, very accurately here. But his problem is that he can't castle. And the reason why that's a problem is not that I'm going to launch some kind of direct checkmating attack, though in fact that happened in the game and I won very quickly. But his rooks can't get connected, so he's going to have a very difficult time finishing his development. And in fact what happened, he played something like bishop to g7, I played knight a4, knight c5, he had played something like bishop to b7, rook c8, and then when my knight went to c5, he went bishop to a8, then I played b3 and c4, and I prevented this knight from going anywhere. And so I achieved this massive bind, and then I was able to convert it to a mating attack. So the point isn't that this particular variation is winning for white, by no means. And likewise with 3, knight f6, e5. But just the point is, again, to not just play your moves automatically without paying any attention to what the opponent might be up to. Okay, and now we'll tell another dragon story, but this time from white's perspective, so a trick he has to watch out for. Okay, so e4, let me see if I got the right one. Yeah, c5, knight f3, again, we know the basic dragon. And then this is the mainline Yugoslav, or as the Russians call it, I think the rouser attack. And then here white can either castle long, which allows d5. It's the main move against it. Not the only move, and I'm sure Greg Shahade has presented lots of his dragon games. I'm not sure if he always plays d5. I think he's played some other things too. But anyway, d5 is the main move. And white can stop that with bishop to c4, and then you go into standard lines with bishop to d7, castles, and black can play various things here. Rook c8, rook to b8, all kinds of interesting things. Okay, so that's what white is expecting, what white knows to play, and so on. But let's say one day he faces knight c6. Okay, plays d4, takes, and now g6. All right, now here white can play c4 and go into a very different kind of setup. But if he plays knight to c3, things are a little bit interesting. So bishop g7, bishop b3, knight f6, and here white might think, okay, nothing's changed. Black's just kind of flipped the move order around a little bit, so I'll play f3, castles. And now, okay, depending on which flavor of dragon white likes to play, or which flavor of anti-dragon white likes to play, he might either play bishop to c4 or queen to d2. But again, we don't want to be a zombie. We want to think, okay, what's the difference? And so the point is here that if you play queen to d2, black plays d5. And this is quite different because in this move order, black did not play d6 and then d5. He played d5 in one shot, one move, right away. So what black is a tempo up on the main line, and that's got to be to his favor. So in the main line, it's somewhere between equal and a little bit better for white. Well, here it's probably just easily, immediately equal for black because of the extra move. I mean, it does matter. Okay, well, then we think, well, maybe that's not good, so we'll play bishop to c4 instead. But now there's another trick that black nastily has, and it's queen to b6. Well, you might wonder, what's the point of this? Of course, the b2 pawn is threatened, but hey, big deal. We just play bishop to b3, and now we're threatening knight to f5, and just play queen to d2 next move and be happy. But black has this nasty trick, knight takes e4. And now the knight on d4 is attacked 3 times and only defended twice. So we've only got these two guys defending it. So there are a few things to calculate, but basically black is one a pawn here. So the main move for white is knight to d5, but black has this check. That lets him escape everything. c3. Probably the best move now, I think, is bishop takes d4, and then knight to c5. And again, black has managed to escape with an extra pawn. I mean, white has maybe a little bit of compensation, but this variation should definitely be avoided for white. So what went wrong? Well, we go back. Okay, this is all forced, knight f6. Well, here's the thing. Okay, knight to g4 is not threatened yet because this pawn is back on d7. So there's no bishop getting to g4 to support knight to g4. So we don't have to play f3. So instead, we should play the immediate bishop to c4. So we've got d5 controlled, and here queen to b6 is not really the same thing. So now if queen to b6, okay, bishop to b3, all right, knight takes e4, knight c6. So this is a difference. Okay, though actually this one is still kind of complicated as well. I'm not sure I remember all the theory behind it, but the key point is that in the f3 variation, the bishop on e3 would just be loose; it would just hang. Whereas here, that's not an issue. So something like queen takes c6. I think white plays the sacrifice with knight to d5. So this is actually it's still a pawn sack, but I don't think it's considered a good line for black on account of this. So bishop to d4, f6, and now I think queen to e2 is the move. Okay, so if the knight moves, then f6 hangs, and on e takes d5, we play f3. Castling is no good for black because then the d pawn is pinned. So, okay, white is down a piece and a pawn at this second, but black has problems. And of course, the piece is falling straight away. All right, so that's a big difference. Okay, so bishop to c4. These tricky lines are at best dubious for black. So black castles, and now once again we have to be accurate here. Not f3 because then queen b6 and we're in the same trouble. but bishop to b3 straight away. All right, so now queen to b6 is just meaningless because there's no threat to the bishop on e3, so the knight just moves away to f5 or e6. Yeah, e6 clearly. And okay, so now black plays d6. Now he's used that tempo, and he's threatening knight to g4 now. So we play f3, and we've transposed back into a regular dragon. Now, one thing for white players. So again, white players shouldn't be zombies either, in another respect. So if against the main dragon move order, so we're here. If you never play bishop to c4 but always castle queenside, well, and you don't know anything about bishop to c4 here, then you have to be careful. You don't want to get tricked into this move order because now you're going to go into a variation you don't know. So I would say, unless you prepare this, then you should play c4 back here and punish your opponent. So you shouldn't let your opponent get away with this tricky move order which will drag you into a line that you don't know. So, there's a lot of these move order finesses. A lot of this zombie chess idea is related to finesses of move order. So there is a bit of both going on. Okay, some more examples. So this is always useful. So let's look at some other Sicilians. Okay, so this time we'll look at, let's say, if you play a classical Sicilian. All right, so that's this variation. If you play this, then let's think about what happens if your opponent plays knight to c3 on move 2. So a slightly tricky move order. Now, you might be so used to playing d6 on move 2 that you just play it here, even though the opponent played knight to c3. Now, if he plays knight to f3, well, you're back to where you were before, so no problem. But if he plays f4, now he drags you into a line of the Grand Prix attack. Now, it's not an especially great line. I think black is fine, but we'll see something important here. Okay, so all of this is standard, f5, and now black plays d5. So notice, d6 to d5 was black's last move here. Okay, black's results are fine here. It's a very complicated, sharp variation. Nothing for black to fear, but certainly something for black to respect and to know what he's doing if he gets to this position. Okay, so that's what happens on d6. But if you know about this line, then you should play knight to c6. Because the point is, okay, you still get to your opening if you want it. So if he plays knight f3, d6, there you are. You're back in the classical Sicilian. And if he plays f4, well, you can do the same thing that we did in the last line. But notice something key that's different here. Here you're playing d7 to d5. And so the difference is you've gotten this a move faster. Okay, so there was no d7, d6, and then d6, d5. So we're a tempo up on that variation. So if you play the classical Sicilian, when you see knight to c3, it's no problem. You play knight to c6. If you're a Najdorf player, however, then you do have a problem. Okay, so the Najdorf is this. Well, you all know what the Najdorf is by now after my 57-part series on the super fast Najdorf. So here's our Najdorf. So now let's think, well, what do we do if back on move 2 they play knight to c3, pardon me. See, now that knight to c6 idea is no good because our opponent can then switch up and again go into that knight to f3 line and we're out of our Najdorf. So now we don't get the Najdorf anymore. Okay, this is just something different. Now you can play some lines to punish white here. So you could play, for instance, a move like e5, which is a little bit extreme, but it shows white that, well, I'm not going to get what I want, but you're not going to get what you want either. So that can be played. All right, this is a line that has had some popularity. Okay, what else can you do though? Let's go back to move 2, however. Let's consider some other options. Okay, you can play d6, but then as we saw, if he plays f4, you get an okay line, but white got something for free too. So you're going to be a tempo down or you get the tempo down version of one of the main lines. Now, another thought, you could try e6, and then on knight f3, d6, takes, and a6. So it's not quite a Najdorf yet, but it will be next move. You just play knight f6, and there you are in a Najdorf. White could try g4, which is a little bit funny. But okay, that's kind of a sideline. Karpov tried it once against Kasparov in one of their early matches, and okay, it was an interesting game, but he didn't get anything out of that. So chances are that this will transpose into a Najdorf. But there's still another consideration. So let's go back to our regular Najdorf position. Currently, the most popular move is bishop to e3. And now there are two ways to face this. You can play e6, and if you play e6, you've got no problem with that other variation. So this is a Scheveningen approach, and okay, it's perfectly fine, but it's a slightly different variation. So the kind of pure Najdorf approach is to play e5. But if that's what you do, then you've got a problem in this variation, because your pawn's already on e6, so if he plays bishop to e3, you're committed to the Scheveningen and not to the Najdorf. Well, if that's the case, then what do you do if you're trying to get to a Najdorf, or at least trying to either get into a Najdorf or at least not go into some other variation a tempo down? Well, the last thing you could try is maybe a6. And this is interesting. Okay, so if they play f4, they go Grand Prixing, you can play b5. And this variation, of course, you need to examine, but it's a possible line. On the other hand, though, if he plays knight f3, if he was just bluffing, well, then you got your straight Najdorf, and you can play e5 when the opponent plays bishop to e3. Okay, so this, I hope, gives some idea of some finesses in some double king pawn openings. And now we'll turn quickly to some d-pawn variations where some similar considerations come into play. Okay, so first one that I wanted to look at is in a Queen's Gambit. So actually, you know what, I think I'll skip the Queen's Gambit one and just discuss a couple of King's Indian points. So forget the Queen's Gambit one, maybe we'll do that another time, but I think the King's Indian one will be more interesting to most of you, and probably more useful as well. Okay, so here we go. Actually, yeah. All right, so d4, knight f6. So we'll go into the absolute main line with a position that has been played, I would bet, millions of times. I would be surprised if this position has not occurred at least 1 million times in chess history. So in the databases, there's something like 26,000 games. But of course, the databases are almost all very high-level games. It doesn't count Blitz, with very, very, very few exceptions. You know, it doesn't count all the games that are played online. Doesn't count all the games played at club level. So I would be shocked if this position hasn't occurred over 1 million times. And okay, White has tried all kinds of things here. He's played b4. Well, we'll look at some of that stuff later on. All right, but so this is all very standard. And okay, of course, here Black plays e5, not fearing d takes e5. It's considered to be a very boring, drawish variation that gives White nothing. So here, takes, bishop g5, and Black can play all kinds of moves. He can play rook e8, can play knight b to d7. Oops, let's grab the knight. He can play c6, and I think those are the big three. Also rook f8, but that's lesser in frequency. Okay, so again, let's do our once upon a time deal. And suppose that in this position, or actually we'll go here, knight of 3 castles. All of a sudden one day you see bishop to g5. Well, okay, big deal. e5. So takes, and you think, oh, this guy's just playing drawing chess. Takes. Okay, but now the guy plays either knight to d5, or, let's say bishop takes f6, and then knight to d5. And all of a sudden, what do we do? Something went wrong, because this is threatened. Oops. And this is threatened. And there's no way to protect both. What we can do, at least, is play knight to d7 and cut our material losses to just a pawn. But still, this is definitely not what we had in mind. And likewise, in the knight to d5 case, this is, well, similar. And it's, again, Black should probably play knight to d7, knight b to d7, to just lose a pawn. Because otherwise he's losing at least in exchange. So, again, when you see a move you don't know, all right, so you're familiar with bishop to e2, you've seen it, tens of times, hundreds of times, more. You're not familiar with bishop to g5, so it's worth asking, okay, what's the point of this? Does it make a difference? And does anything change if I play what I would normally play? And it turns out that it does. Okay, a more well-known version of the same trap goes like this. So bishop to e2 instead. Castles, and you might say, okay, my opponent's going to play knight to f3 now. I play e5, we're back to normal stuff. He plays this, and, well, same thing. e5 is just a big blunder. Takes, 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 and then either, again, knight to d5, or you swap on f6 first and then play knight to d5. All right, so got to keep your eyes open. Whenever you see something new, always ask, what is my opponent's idea? What's the idea? Does it affect what I wanted to do? So you always have to keep those kinds of questions in mind. Okay, now let's look at something a little bit more sophisticated, also in the King's Indian. So again, knight f3, castles, so we'll look at our main line, and we'll get to this position. Now, many of you, I would say almost probably any of you who have seen this position, know that what often happens is that you end up with this kind of race, where white is pushing on the queen side and trying to break through as fast as possible. So you'll see moves like b4 and c5, and let's say a bishop comes to e3 and a rook comes to c1, and you take on d6, the knight comes to b5 and sometimes into c7, and white just goes seemingly for broke over on the queen side. And on the king side, black is doing the exact same thing. I mean, it gets really exciting. Knight h5, f5, and the pawn comes to f4, and maybe the pawn comes to g5, knight goes to g6, knight comes back to f6, and then black goes for g4 and tries to just break through over on the king side. So you have some of the most exciting games in chess history in this variation. People like Korchnoi especially are specialists on the white side of this opening. Fischer in his day, Kasparov certainly in his, Radjabov now with black, and Van Wely with white are some of the great players in this. Also, Kramnik was a great player on the white side of this. Probably still is, but I haven't seen him face too many King's Indians in a while. So, okay, various possibilities here for white. So the main move in the certainly in the 90s and early 2000s is the bayonet attack with b4. And still certainly probably the most common move played nowadays, though, but not by much. So, okay, b4, and then black can play their knight h5, going straight away for kingside play, or can play a5 and try to slow down white's expansion on the queen side. Because white wants to play c5. I mean, that's kind of a fundamental break to open the c file, to either weaken black on with his c7 pawn or with the d6 pawn. So those are the two tries for black. But other moves have been played for white. Knight to e1 is basically just as common, more common historically, but still a standard move. And the idea is, okay, the knight comes to d7, white plays bishop e3, and then he drops the bishop back to f2. Okay, black plays g5, white's going to go for c5 as quickly as possible, and bombs away. Now, one thing about this knight on e1, it's kind of stupid there. Now, it does do one thing that is useful. So the knight wants to come to d3 and then support c5. But then once it does that, it's kind of clumsy on d3. It has nothing left. There's nothing left for it to do on that square. So the knight would like to be on d3 for the sake of the pawn on c5, but once that's gone, the knight would really rather be on d2 going to c4. Okay, well, so that leads to another variation, knight to d2. Why not? Well, the mini problem with knight to d2 is that black plays a5, so killing the b4 idea right away. And after a3, black can play knight to d7. This is a main line, but he can also even play c5 and really shut things up. And now that c5 isn't happening, I mean, white never plays d takes c6 here. That would be a bad move. But now that there's no c5 possibility, what's the knight doing on d2? It blocks the bishop. It's not going to c4, so it's kind of a clumsy piece. So we might put all this together for white and think, well, gee, why don't I just play bishop to e3? Okay, and so since in all of these variations, okay, knight to d2, a5, a3, knight to d7 is a main move, and here comes all the attacks, or against knight to e1, knight to d7 is a main move, on b4, okay, we don't play knight to d7 here, but we play knight h5 with the same idea of playing f5. So when you see bishop to e3, you might go in full zombie mode and play, well, knight to d7. But now watch what happens. Okay, so now white plays knight to d2, f5. Okay, so black gets in his stuff, but here comes white. Okay, black piles up, and white has everything exactly where it's supposed to be, and has achieved it really quickly. So the knight didn't have to go from f3 to d1, e1 to d3, and then maybe to b2 and then c4. So it went straight to d2 and then straight to c4. The bishop didn't get blocked behind a knight on d2. It was able to go bishop b3 and be fine, f3, bishop f2, and so on. So white lost no time anywhere. Everything just went perfectly. So what happened? Well, let's think about this position here. And let me get rid of all of these arrows. We know what the plans are. Come on. Let me get rid of them. There we go. Okay. So, again, white's plan is to play c5. How does he achieve it? Well, okay, b4 is kind of its own thing, but again, black can kind of mess that up with a5. If we play knight e1, d3, as I said, we misplace the knight after c5 has been achieved. If we play knight to d2, then if black stops c5, the knight's dumb there. So bishop to e3 is perfect. But again, if we realize, well, gee, what's white's idea? Well, he wants to play knight to d2 and then go for a quick c5. Well, can we punish white, for putting the bishop there? And the answer is yes, we can. It sounds like a good campaign slogan. Knight to g4. And this messes up white's plan entirely. So black gets what he wants, because now he's cleared the path for the f-pawn to go to f5. But white doesn't get to keep his bishop on e3. I mean, if he leaves it there, black is going to rip it off in a heartbeat, and life is good. So again, we don't want to be a zombie. We want to think, what's the idea? So you think, well, white never plays bishop to e3. I've never seen this move before. What's it all about, right? So instead of just saying, okay, bishop e3, the bishop usually ends up there anyway, so I'll make my moves, white makes his moves, and we'll get to something normal. Well, no, white gets something for nothing unless you play knight to g4. Because here, the bishop is supporting the c5 advance. We don't need to use this knight for that. And once the c5 advance takes place, we have knight d2, c4. And notice one other thing. Okay, on b4, a5, all right, you can't play c5 here, because the pawn on b4 is hanging, and you can't play a3 here because of the pin on the rook to the rook on a1. So ab, and you can't play ab because you lose your rook. So this forces white to do something a little bit awkward. So bishop e3 is perfect, except for that. Because here, okay, knight e7, as I said, knight to d2. We do that, again, because the knight wants to go to c4, but also because we want to keep the bishop on this diagonal. And so here we go, b4. a5 does nothing here. White just plays a3. And he would love for black to make the exchange, because the more lines that open on the queen side, the easier it is for white's attack to break through over there. So knight f6, c5. See, we achieved it. No sweat at all. And now the knight comes to c4. Okay, so I hope that in addition to the specific knowledge that this is giving, or I hope it's giving, you're also getting kind of a useful idea of how to conduct your games practically. So whenever your opponent makes a move in the opening you don't know, always ask, stop. First thing is to stop. Don't just move automatically, unless it's clearly a blunder or something like that. But if it's just an interesting move and you haven't seen it before, even if it looks familiar, even if it looks like something that would normally happen anyway, stop and try to ask yourself, well, what's the difference here? What is my opponent's move? What does my opponent's move change compared to what I know, what I'm used to? And often by spending a few minutes there and puzzling it out, you'll either save yourself some grief, or if your opponent's move is a bad move, as bishop to e3 in fact is a bad move, you can figure out how to punish it. So I hope this helps, and I'd love to hear stories where you've put this kind of idea into practice in your own games, whether before you heard this presentation or afterward. And some positive feedback in that respect would be absolutely wonderful. So thanks a lot. Before you go, let me remind people to check out my blog, chessmind.powerblogs.com. So have a great week, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.